Can you hear me okay? Great. Buenas noches. How is everybody? Awesome. I hear the tamale line is still going. Okay, well, hopefully folks will get in here soon. So hi, it's so wonderful to see y'all here just a week before Christmas. My name, again, is Diaz, and I am delighted to be here hosting two of my Latina chef heroes. So, you know, food and family are central elements of Latin American and Latino Christmases or Navidades. And the two brilliant Latino food experts I have for y'all today are Fany Gerson, whose cookbook, My Sweet Mexico, focuses on delectable Mexican desserts, and Maricel Presilla, who is a James Beard Award-winning cookbook author, historian, and cultural anthropologist. And her latest books include The New Taste of Chocolate and Peppers of the Americas. So let's give a hand to Fany and Maricel. Donde quieran. Bienvenidas. I'm so happy to be here with y'all. Thank you for joining us.
It's fantastic.
So let's get right to it, since we have tamales all over the place and everybody came here to
They're still eating.
talk about tamales and see tamales. What is a tamal, Maricel?
That's a very good question. What is a tamal? Well, a tamal is a surprise. You never know what is inside until you unwrap it. It might have a filling or it might not, like the one that you're eating today. There are always surprises in terms of the masa, which is the dough. Is it made out of fresh corn or maybe out of lime-treated corn, like the tamales of Mexico? But I think that much more than a surprise, it encapsulates who we are as Latin Americans. You know, it's like a palimpsest. Layer after layer of history, and the fact that today you're eating something that is totally pre-Columbian in origin, but actually something that has been enriched through centuries of mixture. You know, Latin America is, I would say, that is the most exciting laboratory of intercontinental fusion that the world has ever seen.
Wepa.
And all that is wrapped
right there in that little dish?
In that tamal. And well, technically speaking, any dough made out of corn or vegetables that is cooked, wrapped in leaves is a tamal. And there are many ways of cooking a tamal. It could be steaming, boiling, even roasting, or cooking under the earth. In a pip, as is done in the Yucatan. But it's just, you know, what you have today. You have two types of tamales. You have Fany's. You brought the lime.
Yeah, the lime tamales.
The lime tamal made with nixtamalized corn. It's corn, dry corn that has been treated with lime. But the shape of her tamal, and I haven't seen it, but I know it's different than mine. It has to be. Because there are many ways of wrapping a tamal. So mine is, you know, made with a canoe method. Hers is probably different. So it could be plantain leaves. It could be chaya leaves. It could be just about anything. That even bromeliad leaves are used. Wow. So there you are. So it's the world, you know, in this little package.
You can even use like the tomatillo husk. That makes great little tamales for.
There you are. I never thought of it.
So tons of different variations across Latin America and the Caribbean. Tons. And to be specific, so folks here can get a sense of what exactly can change from one tamal to another, from one place to another.
Well,
what's the main difference?
The name, because, you know, we say tamal because, of course, we're very familiar with Mexican tamales, but the word comes from the language of the Aztecs, Nahuatl. And but the first time that Spaniards encountered something like a tamal was in Cuba, and it was the Taino Arawak Indians who were cooking corn dough. They had 2 harvests of corn a year, and so the fresh corn was wrapped in green corn husk and cooked on ambers.
So but quite different from what we have here on the table.
But when the Spaniards went to Mexico, they found something completely different, and the Aztecs call it tamale. And I say tamale in Spanish, not tamale, by the way. But the thing is that Spaniards had this bad habit. When they liked the word, they took it everywhere. So they traveled down to Peru, and they brought the word tamal with them to Colombia. But there were preparations that were very similar that had other names. For example, humita. In Mexico, for example, in Michoacán, they're called uchepos.
Yeah.
Fresh corn, and corundas when they're wrapped with the corn leaves. So the thing is that tamal comes from Mexico, but there are so many other names.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And Fany and Maricel as well. Why do you think tamales or tamales are so popular throughout Latin America? What makes people want to keep eating them and making them?
I think
someone in the audience said they're good.
They are, yes, essentially. They're delicious. Mm-hmm. It's also, it's a very filling and inexpensive way to feed a lot of people. And it's something that I think the sort of the rituality of it, the gathering that goes around making tamales is a big part of it, because it's rarely like a single person making tamales. Mm-hmm. So it's something that you make in celebrations, in, something that you can make in abundance, but also in the way of making them. You know what I mean? Like you can get everybody, different generations involved, and it's sort of a passage of like heritage.
But also because they're time consuming. Mm-hmm. If you read the chronicles of Bernardino de Sahagún,
who is that?
Of the conquest. Well, it's a writer who specialized in the culture of pre-Columbian Mexico, and so he wrote extensively about food too. And so he talks about very elaborate tamales, very simple tamales that were round, mm-hmm. and he describes them as being like paella, which is like a bowl of fat. Mm-hmm. But also he talks about super elaborate tamales made for the merchant class, with all kinds of fillings and in all kinds of shapes and with designs. And he mentions that for very important occasions like weddings and naming ceremonies, the women would spend 3-4 days making tamales, but that hasn't changed. Mm-hmm. Because some tamales can be time consuming, like the hallacas from Venezuela that take days. So obviously you're gonna serve that for special occasions when you can bring the whole community to help you or the family. And because they are important, in Aztec times they were offered to the gods. So I think that the importance of the tamal as ritual food, as something that is important and noble, sort of stay with us to this day. So it's not something offensive to serve tamales to important company at all.
Amazing.
Yeah, but I also want to add to that I think, at least in Mexico, it has become part of like an everyday sustenance for a lot of people. Like you always say,
they're very portable.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they're very affordable for a lot of construction workers. Yes,
like you can put one in your pocket.
It's portable also.
It's portable.
It's portable food.
Yeah,
like an empanada. It's portable.
Exactly.
And I am from Puerto Rico, and we eat something that we don't call a tamal at all, but it's basically a tamal. We eat what are called pasteles. Has anyone here had them or been familiar with them?
How many?
Huepa. About 15, 20 people. I mean, we're in New York.
Good.
So, I mean, it's almost the exact same process, but it's the masa is made with yuca or taro and other roots and plantain. And then it's filled with this very Spanish kind of filling. It's braised pork, olives with pimentos, raisins a lot of times, and chickpeas. And they're incredible. But to me, the thing that always really stood out, and I think I have an image. Here. Thanks,
There
Kim.
you are. That's from my book.
So the thing that I always remember about making these as a kid is it's just like what you're describing. It was this process. The women in my family would come together for the entire day, and each of us would have kind of our role. I was always the one that smeared a little grease on the leaves and was like constantly eeating little bits of pork.
Did you get to choose your role?
As I aged, I got to choose my role. But in the beginning, I was the smearer of the grease on the leaves. Pero it was such a magical experience for me as a kid. It was one of the few times that my family would get together without conflict and prepare a ton of food, and then everyone would come home with their little kind of paquete, and you would either stick them in the freezer and store them, or you would serve them at dinner. And I understand that there's a really similar kind of tradition in Mexican culture called a tamalada, and I was hoping that y'all could tell us what those are and why they're so amazing. I don't know if Maricel thinks they're amazing. ¿Qué piensas?
Of course they're amazing. I mean, we had a tamalada today. Basically, all you ate. Tamales, you had a big steamer there with tamales. You had 2 types. That's a tamalada. It could be, more elaborate, more tamales. That's a tamalada.
What else? Is there musical tradition? Do people have particular roles? Or do you just all come together and kind of fill in?
I mean, I think, it varies. I mean, Maricel knows more about what goes on beyond Mexico. I know more about specifically in Mexico, but not just each region, but each family has their own sort of traditions. But again, sort of to echo what we were talking about before, the tamalada, I believe, starts in the making of the tamales. So essentially it's a tamal feast, So with that, of course, it comes, like the music or, other things that go on in their individual traditions. But it's really about, the tamales. And it's not a certain amount, and it's not a certain variety or anything like that. But there are, in Mexico at least, there are certainly festivals that are, big versions of tamaladas, and they're just really delicious.
Well, and for me, it was a seasonal situation because we would make tamales as a community and family effort during carnival time. Mm-hmm. And so it was a joyous occasion for everybody to get together, and it was the harvest.
This is you and your family in Miami or in other places?
No, well, I do that even in New Jersey.
Got it.
All
Good.
right?
Of course.
And I sent some pictures, but unfortunately, there. My God, you're fast. I sent this this afternoon. I just wanted my goddaughters to learn this idea of the tamalada. They're getting together to make tamales and to have tamales, lots of them. So we go to the south of New Jersey to get field corn, which is the closest to the starchy corn that we had in Cuba. And so I taught my godchildren how to do this. We go to the backyard with all that corn right there, and that's Lucia picking corn, and just we do the whole process. We just husk the corn, and we grate it, and we make a sofrito, which is a cooking sauce that really with pork, similar to that of the pasteles, and but the whole process is important from beginning. And you mentioned that. I think the process.
I'm glad you mentioned that. So we've been talking a lot about why they're so delicious, and that they are delicious, and that we should keep eating them because they're so delicious. But how do you make them?
How do you make them?
What are the most important parts of the process? And you can chime in, Fany.
She will tell you a different story because she even has a machine that she imported from Mexico to grind her nixtamalized corn. My tamales, my tradition is fresh corn tamal, like the one you have there, made with American corn, which is sweet. That's why there is a touch of sweetness in that corn. But the one that we used to make in Cuba, in my hometown, Santiago de Cuba, were called hallacas. And there was no sweetness to them. So I adapted to what I can find. But the thing is that I told you that I learned about tamaladas for carnival time, when we all got together.
Which is in the spring?
And that's for us. It's not a pre-Lent thing. It's in July. In fact, 23rd of July to 26th of July, that's when we have carnivals in my hometown. And so that's the time for tamales.
Yeah.
So I wanted to bring this to New Jersey, but what I do is not what she does. So why don't you?
Yeah, what do you do, Fany?
What do you do, Fany?
So, well, to say sort of like how you make tamales, like when, Maricel was talking about the different kinds of tamales there are, we could literally sit here going through the list of, even just one variety in the different ways of cooking them. But so the most sort of common ones, which is sort of like one that I brought today, made from masa. So the corn in Mexico, for the most part, is white corn that's not as sweet as the American corn.
Here
and
it is.
yeah. And
we have a demo.
so this is a recipe. No, you should have it. I had yours.
No, you show them.
Oh, okay.
That's your tamal.
I can't talk and eat. Okay, so this is this is one of my favorite recipes from my book, and it's a lime tamale. Did you all try it? Did you like it? Yes. Cool. You better say that. No. So this woman showed me how to make them, and she had like all of these specific things, and she would, as I felt I was kind of cheating because I used like a mixer instead of by hand, but I was in a rush, and I really do try to make them by hand, but it was.
There's a reason why we make tools to make these things easier, right?
But I love doing it by hand, and it takes a long time to get to the right consistency. And in Mexico, it's very funny because we have a lot of times it's just the flavor is just sweet tamal. There's no, it's just sweet. So it's like, what's the flavor? Oh,
so it's
just
almost
sweet.
like a cake.
Yeah, and most often they're pink, very bright pink, and they have some raisins and like a little bit of like candied fruit inside, which used to be like a candied cactus called biznaga, but it's in extinction, and so now it's more like candied pineapple or things like that. And but really, sort of going back to the original question, most people nowadays use masa harina, because it's much more.
And that's something probably folks in the audience could find.
Yeah, and so even though I do have that machine, this one I made with that one because I want people to feel. You made it with maseca? With the, not maseca, it's the minza.
That's
Out of those two
I
brands,
know that one.
I prefer minza. But anyways, and most of the recipes actually, you blend the water, you mix water with the dried, with the masa, which is like a flour, and then you add it. But this particular recipe is made differently. Like and her recipe was using shortening, vegetable shortening. But I use butter, and I just put a little bit of shortening. I just like the taste better, but I didn't want to completely, sort of ignore what she said. It just adds to the texture. And because a lot of them, they're made with lard, but then with the lime, it really competes.
Yeah, that doesn't sound, lard and lime doesn't sound as delicious.
No, they're actually really good.
Okay.
But they do have a savoriness to them, right? Yeah. And but the one of the most important things, I think, for me in making this type of tamal is how long you beat it for. Whether it's by hand, the masa, the masa itself. So why
does that make a difference? What does it do to beat it?
It's how tough or how light it's going to be, and or if it's going to cook properly. And so you want to put a little bit of the dough in a glass of cold water. And if it sinks, you need to beat it more.
Okay.
I don't know the science behind it. Folks. I don't know. But if it floats, it's ready. Now, again, this is this type of tamale because there's other types of tamales, like in Mexico, in Yucatan, we have one called tamal colado, and that's like a porridge.
I love those.
Tamal. I love
That's one of my
those.
favorite.
So tips like the ones you just gave about the glass. I know that I started to learn to cook at some of these family gatherings. That's the first time I made a sofrito, the first time I ever cooked meat. Was it something like this? Did y'all have a similar way that you learned these little tips in your own families? Did you learn to cook from your family in that same way?
Well, you were talking about, those tamales, you learned it from someone, right?
I learned it from someone, but it was through when I did the research. Like, I did not grow up in a house. I grew up in a house with great food, but I didn't grow up in a house where I learned sort of a lot of things that I now know. It was more through the research that I've done, and just curiosity, and just always loving food and wanting to find out more and asking and just immersing myself in the culture. So I didn't have that, but now I have sort of these traditions that I hope to inherit to my son and my siblings and so forth.
I was very lucky because I did learn at least traditional tamales from my region from family. I learned how to make the fresh corn tamales that you're eating today. Our version with the starchy corn that is not sweet at all from, my maternal family. So the minute I arrived in the United States, I really wanted to repeat that. But also, I'm a researcher. So in order to get the recipes from my big book, Gran Cocina Latina, which has a big chapter called Tamal and Family, it took me, I wouldn't say months, it took me years to complete. So I learned other ways of making tamales. So I was able to, just to look at my tamales in a different perspective. But our tamales are I think it's a bit easier than yours, in the sense that you have to you can taste the corn and know that the corn is right. So essentially, what you do is you need the husk to wrap the tamales. The problem with American corn is that they're smaller than the ones in Cuba, because you need to have a big husk to wrap the tamal properly. But I found ways to deal with that situation, and I used the dried corn husk, and I buy Mexican dried corn husk. They're usually very large. So this is
special that you get them from, or you buy them
no,
at the
I just
store?
any Latin American market would have that. So this has maybe, unless Clara, I think Clara took the other, it's like a boat. So you have two. Now I need a napkin. So you need to have two big corn husks to make a tamal. But essentially, what you do is you grate the tamal, and I like to do it by hand.
So you can use the actual corn.
Yeah,
off
I like
the
the texture, but you can use
different.
You can use the food processor or a blender to do that. And then there are tamales with a filling. But my okay, great. But my tamales do not have a filling, and I don't know why. I just decided that I wanted the seasonings to permeate the whole tamal. So after you get your masa, your fresh corn masa, you have to make a sofrito, which is a cooking cooking sauce. It's very old medieval way of seasoning food. It used to be only onions and garlic, and now we have a plethora of other ingredients like tomatoes from the New World. So you make a rich sofrito, and sometimes I use bacon or little pieces of pork, cumin, oregano. So it's a rich flavor foundation for these tamales, and I just add it to the masa, and essentially that's it. And if you want to add a little bit of milk, it all depends on the corn. If the corn needs
sounds like
something.
You really have a showcase for the corn.
And the corn itself, American corn, has sweetness, but it's not a bad thing, because it gives a nice balance. You need the sweetness and the saltiness also to come out with something delicious. Yeah. I like to add hot peppers, because in Cuba we used to have hot tamales, and there is a song.
Spicy? You mean spicy?
Spicy, yeah. With hot peppers. A pepper called ajiwa wow. So I add a little bit ajiwa wow. So, and we have songs about the hot tamales and the not so hot tamales.
So your most recent book is Peppers of the Americas, and in that book you have a recipe for a tamal pie.
A tamalón.
A tamalón,
Exactly.
which is like about this big.
Exactly. So instead of doing this,
why might you make that instead of individuals?
This little package, what I do is just a pie-like tamal. I think we have the picture right there. But I have to tell you that I went through many different recipes, and I was really inspired not by anything from Cuba. I was inspired in the mukbi pollo from the Yucatan. So it's a tamal for the Days of the Dead, which is with nixtamalized masa, which is dyed this color with achiote seeds.
And what color is it?
It's kind of like yellow orange,
like a deep yellow.
So you make, you with the color is this yellow orange, but it's white corn that has been nixtamalized. So you make your masa, and then you marinate chicken, with the recado, which is a particular seasoning mix from the Yucatan. It's very savory and delicious. And then you, essentially, you get something like that, and you wrap it in plantain leaves, banana leaves.
Which is different than the corn husk you usually use.
Exactly. Well, I cook it in the oven. But in the Yucatan, they send it to a pip master, the person who makes cochinita pibil. So that goes underground. So essentially steamed, but also it gets like a little crust. Or sometimes it's sent to a baker. And I just love it because, the chicken is there. It's a big pie. So I said, I need to do something. My editor, Maria Guarnacelli, did not want that recipe in my Gran Cocina Latina book because she said it was too long. So it was cut. So for this other book, it was still too long. I said, let me do something a bit different. So what I did is to use the masa for my Cuban-style tamales and do a recado in a different way, with different all the Mexican chiles of the capsicum onion family. So it's very beautiful and tasty. So I love to serve this for Christmas. It's just amazing. But it doesn't mean that I'm going to have only that for Christmas. Unfortunately, I'm Cuban, and we need to have roast pork.
Of course.
Roast pork, rice and beans.
Naturally.
If you're from Venezuela, you would have something very elaborate that would take a whole family days to make, called a yaca. But they still have roast pork. They have a bread filled with ham.
Always
and
have to have the
they
roast
have
pork.
a chicken salad, too, and all that is eaten together. So it's not just a tamal. So you work on that, but you have to work on the other things too.
And we've been talking a lot about tamales, but there's so many holiday traditions in Latin America. It's such a vibrant time of year. Fany, I know you've brought something special for us that I think we'll have on stage in a moment.
Okay, it's gonna come.
Yeah, but in the meantime, I wanted to talk a little about one of my favorite holiday traditions from Puerto Rico. We make what's called Coquito, which I would have had here tonight, but we could not have liquor, unfortunately. But there's a recipe in my cookbook, Coconuts and Collards, if you want to make it at home. But Coquito is a coconut-based eggnog. It has mostly coconut milk, at least in my recipe, rum instead of brandy, cinnamon instead of nutmeg, and a little bit of lime. And it's, of course, it's delicious and it's got liquor in it, so it's fun. It's holidays. But it always, to me, signals that it's Christmas when I start to see Coquito around. And I feel like Rosca De Reyes is a similar kind of signal that the holidays are here.
Yeah.
So tell folks what we're looking at.
So this is Rosca De Reyes, so Three Kings bread, and we make it at La Newyorkina, at my shop here in the
And
West
remind
Village.
folks where your shop is.
It's on Sullivan Street and West 3rd, right? A block away from Washington Square Park. And so this is the most traditional one, and it's with candied fruit, and then this is sort of a more modern version that I created a couple of years ago because everybody always fights for the shell, like the sugary crust. So I figured, well, I'm going to make one so that everybody gets it, Even though it's about the fruit, very few people like the fruit. So, so we have both. So usually, people get, okay, I'm going to get the traditional and the other one. But, so we eat this the 6th of January. When we celebrate
Three Kings Day.
Three Kings, and there's a plastic baby inside.
Oh, like a king cake.
Yes, exactly.
In Creole culture.
So originally it was supposed to be like this porcelain. That's what they say. I'm not so sure, but you cut it, and then whoever gets the baby has to make the tamales.
Oh, so you don't want the baby.
Yes, exactly. Yep. So you need to cut it to see who's going to make the tamales. And in the kitchen, they joke because they put 3, and they said, even if we put 1, anytime I slice it, I always get it. So, and I don't know where they are.
I love this. We do this at my restaurant. So I'm always looking at the person who really knows how to make tamales.
And tell folks what your restaurant is and where it is.
Hoboken, New Jersey.
And what's it called?
Safra is the Pan-Latin restaurant where I have a lot of Mexican things, a lot of moles there and tamales, and Cucharamama, which is South American.
Amazing. You were going to say, you make this at your restaurant.
So we do this at the restaurant. So, I'm always hoping that the person that makes the best Mexican tamales will get it because on the baby, on the Candelaria, which is the 2nd of February, you eat this, which is amazing. And I have to say for your pasteles, the Puerto Rican pasteles, that, this is not just for Christmas. Actually, when we say Christmas, we say Christmas Eve, Nochebuena, which is the 24th, which is the big day for most Latin Americans. Then Christmas Day, Navidad, then the Dia de Reyes, the Epiphany. And you guys eat pasteles also on the Epiphany. And then on the days afterwards, you have something called octavas afterwards. So your Christmas season is really long like yours.
Yeah.
We love Christmas in
Yes.
Puerto Rico.
We like
Very,
to
very
party.
long. And
Yeah.
I just love this.
Yeah,
It's
no, me
amazing.
too. And you know, like I was born. So my dad. It took me a long time to sort of understand what he meant by this, but so I'm Jewish, and which is not very common in Mexico, but he says we're judíos guadalupanos. That's what he considers himself, right? So I don't know how to translate that, but
Equal opportunity.
yeah, equal opportunity.
Jewish Mexicans.
Yeah. So basically, you know, even though like this is not a Jewish tradition by any means, it is more a Catholic tradition because the baby symbolizes,
Baby
you know,
Jesus.
baby Jesus, and
Even though you're cooking
but to me, it's I grew up with sort of this duality of cultures. You know, I feel it as much. You know, like I can't explain it, but I think that term, even though I can't really translate it, really
Because
embodies who.
I think it's a cultural statement.
Yeah.
And all these foods have a ritual significance that everybody understands. You know, so it's a sense of community and sharing by you accepting this and making it your own.
Yeah. So who's gonna cut it? That's very important.
I think-
need to know who's making the tamales.
I think you should cut it.
No.
Who knows how to make tamales here?
But I do have to say, sort of, one thing I forgot to mention in the making of tamales, sort of to go back, that is very important. There's a lot of superstition in Mexico about tamal making, because sometimes I don't know if you guys have made tamales. Or I've heard about this, but sometimes you can make a recipe you've made a million times and it won't cook. Like it just won't cook.
What do you mean it doesn't cook?
It just
It
they
just
won't
doesn't-
cook.
That's
They
why
won't.
soft
this is
or
a
it's
surprise.
watery.
There's something special about this. You need to take care about cooking
no,
this
like
right.
like it just stays raw. Like it can be there for hours, and so there's all these superstitions about it. And so today, for example, like I was very upset about something, like really, really upset, and I don't get upset often, but I was so upset, and I said, I cannot make the tamales until I calm down because they're not gonna cook and they're not going to, you know, like I literally I waited until I was able to, you know.
That's a good call.
I said I can't, and then also because like when I learned to make tamales, you know, there was a special way, like I tie a knot in the pot, and I kiss the knot, and some
So
people
many
dance
superstitions.
around.
Do you
I
make
love
a
it.
cross? Well, you don't make a cross, but some people
But some
make
people
crosses.
make a cross.
You know, in Veracruz.
So there's like all these superstitions that you know, but really you can make a recipe that sometimes they won't, and they say sometimes if there's like somebody that's jealous of you, they won't. You know, like they won't come out. Maybe
Yeah,
the
the evil
tamales
eye.
are better than mine, and I just, you know.
I love it. So maybe during the Q&A, we'll let someone come up and cut this.
Yeah,
and cut this rosca.
I think that's a great idea.
And Maricel, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about one of your recipes from the restaurant that we're going to pull up so folks can see it.
Oh my God.
Tell us about this really unusual recipe that has vanilla in it.
Well, the thing is that I did a big story about Mexican vanilla for Savory magazine years ago, and I was able to photograph it, which is kind of unusual. And I spent a lot of time with vanilla growers, and I was able to get actually, you know, a grower and somebody who did the curing to get together and do the first single state. I brought the Singerman buyers, you know. So the thing is that I got to know this community very well, and I got to know a group of elderly women. Alegría de vivir, joy of living. And they use vanilla in ways that should be the norm, but it's not, because it's funny, you know, in vanilla territory, this is the best vanilla in the world, in Papantla, Veracruz, and people hardly use it. You know, everything is exported. But these women decided that they were going to use vanilla in everything. So I cooked with them, and they made a special sauce with chipotle and vanilla. And I really loved it.
Did it have a sweetness to it?
Yes, it did. And it's not just from the vanilla, but it just had a touch of brown loaf sugar, piloncillo too. in one of the recipes that they did with me. But the thing is that I brought that sauce to my restaurant, and I was trying to find a way to, to use it. And I was working on chiles because I've always been interested, and I like piquillo peppers from Spain. And in the restaurant, we have a great recipe for refried beans. And I said, because in Mexico, refried beans are, all over the place. But this is a recipe from Oaxaca, which I love, spicy and fantastic. And I said, I'm not going to put cod fish in the piquillo like they do in Spain.
That's what they typically put in
Exactly.
there.
So I said, I'm going to put beans. So I, so filled my piquillo peppers with beans. And then I needed the beans to stay in and not run all over the place. So I said, okay, I'm going to put some manchego cheese so that it can kind of, be like a cork. And so where am I going to serve this? And I said, on a bed of my vanilla chipotle sauce. So that's how it started. So it was a recipe for the restaurant, and it's very popular. I opened the restaurant in 2000. So wow, I mean, it's a lot of years.
Sounds
18
delicious.
years I've been making this, and I just decided to write it for the for my pepper book. And I think this is a fantastic holiday recipe.
Awesome.
Because vanilla, it's like a mother. Okay, think about this. It's a mother telling everything else to behave. Vanilla brings everything together. There's a roundness about anything that has vanilla. In the new chocolate making tradition of the artisanal movement, they don't like vanilla. They think it's a extraneous flavoring.
Oh.
But I come from this pre-Columbian tradition where vanilla and chiles and chocolate and cacao were mixed together. So I like it because it does something to food. It just brings everything into focus, enhances flavor. So when you taste something like that, and by the way, there is a tamal from Papantla that you will love. It's with calabaza, with the Caribbean squash, and dried shrimp and vanilla.
Oh, delicious.
I gotta
And it's
try
like
that.
yours, but it has that, that seasoning, and it's just extraordinary.
I gotta try
And
that.
for all of y'all in the audience whose mouths are watering at this description, you can take home a recipe today. We have some printed out for y'all.
Or you can go to Hoboken, past train.
Or you can go to Maricel's restaurant.
And go to Safra
or you
and
can buy
have
her
this.
cookbook. And Fanny, I was hoping you could tell us about another Mexican tradition of making milk fudge.
Yeah. So when I did research, for my first cookbook, My Sweet Mexico, I had the opportunity to travel for a year to do the research, and it was amazing. And when I was doing this interview, and this couple who were bread bakers, they told me, "Oh, you have to go to this candy maker that's 2 blocks from here. Everybody knows each other, very small community." And I go into this, what I can describe like a paradise, like something I could not even have imagined. It was like this family-owned business, like most sweet businesses are in Mexico, and they had these ceramic pots, and they're made with raw milk, and that was sort of the challenge of how to make this recipe in a way that doesn't use raw milk, because it's not, it's
What's the
illegal
difference?
here, and it's
Right.
it's unpasteurized, and it's illegal. And
What's the difference in the consistency, though?
well, it's not just in the consistency, it's in the taste. It's how the sugar cooks with
I
it.
see.
And so, but trying to adapt all of these recipes to sort of a home version. But this is one of the recipes from the book that I've gotten a lot of emails about, because it is candy making. It has to be a lot more precise, but for candy makers, they don't use thermometers or anything like that. They say, I'm getting to el punto. It's like to the spot, to the point. So what is it? And I was like, what do you describe it? Well, you see it. Like, look at it, I'd be like, okay, but, so it's like when you see the bottom of the pot. But depending on the pot that you have or how big it is, or, it can be very finicky. But I really love this recipe.
That looks awesome. So we have time for just a couple more questions before we're going to open up to the audience and cut this Rosca de Reyes.
Yeah.
Maybe, if
You're
folks want to take the risk.
And
I know
if
it
you
might be
don't get a
me.
chance to have it, you can order it for the
At La Newyorkina.
Yeah.
So I was struck as I was thinking about coming here and talking to y'all that, you know, probably a super well-known American holiday tradition is hot chocolate, right? It's like a thing that you would probably have in abundance when it's cold outside. But hot chocolate throughout Latin America is by no means just a holiday thing. It's a thing that's enjoyed in various shapes and forms throughout the year. So I was hoping you could both talk a little bit about different kinds of hot chocolate that maybe folks here haven't heard of. And Fany, I was hoping you could start with the recipes that you have in your book that use chocolate tablets.
So in Mexico, it's I mean, Maricel wrote the book on chocolate, which you have to get.
Yeah, we'll get
first of all. But so in Mexico, most of the chocolate we use is chocolate for beverages. So we call it like chocolate de mesa or tabletas de chocolate, and it's a stone ground for the most part. Chocolate mixed with sugar and some kind of spice. Most often it's with Mexican cinnamon, but sometimes they're made with almonds or peanuts or other kinds of nuts. And of course there's commercial ones, there's not commercial, they're stone ground most traditionally by hand. They're roasted over a comal, which is like it's a flat griddle, which again can be made from different materials, and it can be over fire wood fire or coal, which gives it a really amazing flavor. And then stone ground in ametate, that's the most traditional way, but they're also,
which is a type of mortar and pestle, or it's
it's not a mortar and pestle because it's not this motion. It's a flat, 3-legged. Granite.
Yeah, and you do it on the floor.
Grinding stone.
And you still find a lot of women that do it. But also there are these amazing mills that you find in a lot of smaller cities and towns where, women will roast their beans and their spices and their sugar, and they'll go make the blend, they'll grind everything there. It usually goes through a 2-grind process, and then they make the tablets themselves. They let them dry in the sun, and then you use them. But in talking about tamales, one of the most common beverages to accompany tamales are atoles, which are porridge-like beverages. So they're thickened with different kinds of things like, oatmeal and amaranth, corn, so champurrado is a chocolate atole. And that's one of my favorites. And it's made traditionally without milk. And in Mexico, the traditional way of eating hot chocolate, is also with water, So I really love those two recipes. And actually, like at the store, when we started having the chocolate, we started having a lot of people ask us for whipped cream. And I had this, because part of what I want to do, or what I strive to do, is sort of to educate people, but through the flavors, through what I do. But I also want to make people happy and satisfy them. And, rent is expensive. I can use the whipped cream. So
Sure.
I didn't know what to do. So then, through brainstorming with my brother, we actually came up with like a hot chocolate menu. And so we have like a la antigüita, and we say like that's just with water. Then we call it, like this one is made with, because we make them. We also can't make it at the store with the molinillo, because that's the other thing. It's like this wooden tool that you use to froth it, because the froth is a very distinctive part of the chocolate. And so then we call the American one the el güero, which is a blondie, and that's what I call my husband. So
and that one does have whipped cream.
That one has whipped cream. Yes,
Very kind
and
of
it
you.
is delicious with it. But you know what I mean? It was like, how do you?
But it's so interesting that the champurrado idea, which is an
Can you
atoll.
describe the texture for folks who haven't had it?
It's like a porridge like. But the thing is, that, it's typical of the posadas.
Bless you.
In the posadas in Mexico, when children and adults come singing, and it's like, the Virgin Mary and the inn idea, and then you get champurrado. But the thing is that this is very ancient combination. Anything with corn and chocolate is key. The pre-Columbian cacao drinks were enriched with corn. And so you look at Maya vessels, they have scenes of Maya nobility, actually drinking. You can see clearly, that there are vessels, that contain this kind of atole with cacao. So this is something very important in all of Mesoamerica, not just Mexico is part of Mesoamerica, but in Guatemala still.
What's the significance of the combination of the corn and the chocolate?
It's basically that's those are the two stuffs of life. Corn is it. And cacao is something important. That's why you have the nobles, drinking cacao with corn, which is sustenance. But the old recipes that Bernardino de Sahagún gives from the chocolate makers at the great market, what is today Mexico City, they all contain corn as an atole. And so champurrado is this, is the heir of this very old tradition.
Yeah, it's for one of the oldest beverages, and it's still enjoyed in the same or close to the same way. Well, now it's sweetened.
The kind of tragedy of Mexico and the rest of Mesoamerica is that they were the cradles of great chocolate traditions based on great cacao. Because they had a criollo cacao with white cotyledons and very nutty flavors, and they lost that. They lost that through disease, and they lost the labor, again, through all kinds of outbreaks of disease, and they were competing with Venezuela later on in the colonial period and Ecuador. And so now there is a process of rescue of all that. But the chocolate from Mexico is not made with excellent cacao. It's made with something that the Spaniards wouldn't have, the colonial Spaniards wouldn't have recognized, or the Aztecs would not recognize today, because it's a completely different type of cacao.
Well, thankfully, y'all are keeping those traditions.
No, but those traditions are alive. But what's happening is that there are farmers that are recovering this old criollo. And I have to tell you, I just came from Guatemala, and I'm one of the founders of the International Chocolate Awards, and we have a Central America competition, which is a support competition in cacao country. This is our second year. It was last week in Guatemala City, and I have to tell you that what's happening is extraordinary. And guess what? Many of the gold prizes and the most outstanding, chocolates came from Mexico.
That's
and they
exciting.
came from an area called Soconusco, which is in Chiapas, which is basically was the cradle of the best cacao to be had in Maya times and Aztec
Sí se
times.
puede.
Sí se puede. So I saw it, and I'm totally, I'm still talking about it, and I will be talking about it for a long time.
I can't wait to try it.
So we need to wrap up this portion. We're going to open it up to the audience, but I just wanted to take a moment to thank you both for sharing these stories so far. I feel like I could make a tamal right here on the stage. But thank you.
Thank you.
And we will be taking questions from the audience. I believe that we've got one right here. Thank you. And a microphone ready to go.
Fany, what is the name of your restaurant, and what is it? Just the sweets, or you have all kinds of dishes? And what is your focus?
Yeah, so it's not a restaurant. It's a sweet shop. So it's a Mexican sweet shop. I started out with Paletas, so they're Mexican ice pops, and then we expanded to ice cream and other kinds of pastries and sweets and cakes. So we're sort of like it's, to me, I was describing it the other day as a kind of a very personal love letter in a sweet, in the sweet format of a shop. So.
Up here in the front.
Hi. So my question is, do you think New York is prepared for a tamal festival?
Ooh, good
And-
question.
And which restaurants
Sounds like the
do they have the best tamales, in your opinion, in New York?
Ooh, you're biased, I
That's a good
imagine.
question.
But
Yes.
It's a double question.
Yeah.
First of all, are you ready for a tamal festival?
Yes.
That's it.
Oh.
And I'm sure that there's so many of us from different countries in all over New York that we can bring them together. And I'm sure that there are very good tamales out there. Some I have tasted, some I'm yet to taste, but I think it's a great idea. And yes, I think we're ready.
Yeah, absolutely. And as far as like where, there's really great. I mean, it's not in restaurants, but in Queens have had some of the best tamales. You know,
You have to
In
go
what
to the
neighborhoods?
You have to go to the neighborhoods, the
And-
communities.
Yeah, and not. I'm really not just saying this because it's my husband, but he has a restaurant in Williamsburg called Casa Pública, and it's really amazing. And I tried this sweet potato tamal. It's a very sort of modern colado, a sweet potato tamal colado that's in a very modern way, and I was floored. I was really, it was
she's,
really
she's
amazing.
talking about tamal colado, which is a strain tamal, where you actually take the masa and you dissolve it in water or broth. There's a moment where you strain it, and then what is left, you keep cooking. You add the lard or the oil, whatever you add, and until it becomes like, it takes the right consistency. But it's a very fine, very soft and velvety type of tamal. And to me, it's like, the vaporcitos of the Yucatan, the tamal ranchero from Veracruz, the
Yeah.
nacatamal from Nicaragua. They are all made by that method, and they are absolutely to die for. So I got to go to that place.
You gotta go. It's in Williamsburg.
I have a quick follow-up.
It's in Williamsburg.
Because I feel like the best tamales I've had in New York have come from women selling them on the street out of carts,
Yeah.
and usually inside of black plastic bags. And also on the West Coast, do you have a favorite block for a favorite tamale lady? Or neighborhood or part of Queens?
Now I'm going to quest. I have to find
Yes.
But
I
I
need
feel
to
that
I recommend Jackson
I
Heights.
feel honestly, that I belong to that tradition. We have about 5 types of tamal in between Cucharamama, and I think I have 2 more or 3 more in from Colombia in Cucharamama. But I think we're tamal ladies.
Yes.
Are we? So we need to know now what other women are out there doing something spectacular. So you made me feel really that I need to go out there.
I'll come with you.
Well, actually, yesterday I was having a meeting with the staff at La Newyorkina. We were trying to sort of brainstorm about different things for winter, and I was telling them about the event tonight, and they said, well, why don't you sell tamales? People ask for them all the time. And I said, what the problem is that if I don't sell out, they don't really reheat well,
Yeah.
right? So then we said, well, why don't you do like...
You
so
can
then I
sell
said,
them
instead of
frozen.
doing like, but I don't feel it's but we could.
Listen, totally appropriate. Tamales. No, listen to me. This is very important. All this work you heard about days. Listen, tamales freeze beautifully. All right?
Pasteles do too.
And pasteles, absolutely.
they're much
And
better in the
and so that's the beauty of it, that you keep them in the freezer, you bring them out, you put them in the microwave.
Ooh, trade secrets.
You
Now
wrap
we know it
them
all.
in wet towels and you put them in the microwave, and they're
Eso.
just absolutely perfect.
Awesome.
Okay, so that's why tamales
I
are
must
so.
get a microwave.
When
When
I'll
people
test it out.
No, people ask me to cook. They call me from Amsterdam. They have this chocoa festival. I've done it for 5 years. Okay,
Amazing.
Come and make a chocolate dinner. So I've done it 5 years. Guess what? I come with 3 suitcases. 2 of them contain frozen tamales, and the other one, mole. And you don't need to freeze that. I'm in business.
TSA must love you.
Yeah.
I'm in business. So you guys can be in business
Yeah.
too.
So what I was saying is like, so I said, well, there's Taco Tuesday, so maybe we can start like Tamal Tuesday.
Tamal
like,
Thursday.
Yeah, that's what my husband said, Tamal Thursday. And then I thought today, as I was making them, because I said, maybe maybe we shouldn't make them. Maybe we do a collaboration and somebody that's making tamal. And then today I said, what if every week or every month we featured somebody else? You know?
Okay.
So I'm still
there's
thinking.
ladies that are
Exactly.
Exactly.
So I thought,
Let's go on a quest.
let's
We'll find them.
bring them into the shop and let's all taste some tamales.
Cool.
What do you think?
We have another question.
You tell me about it,
somewhere.
I'll go.
La va. Oh, yes, what you said.
For those of us who want to try our hand at making tamales, would you recommend using the maseca? Would you recommend trying to get some masa from a tortilla place? And do you need to put lard in there? Or like, how do you make the masa?
Well, it depends on what kind of tamal you're gonna make. Again, there's so many varieties. But if you're gonna make sort of at least for me, the kind that's most common in Mexico, if you can get your hands on fresh masa,
Makes all the difference.
it makes all the difference. There's a place in Queens where you can get fresh masa.
Do you know what it's called?
Yes, it's the nixtamal.
Oh, they're still on this.
Yeah.
Great.
So you can
Nixtamal
buy
is the name of the shop.
masa. But if you can't go or it's really far, you really can. I mean, you can use maseca or minsa.
Yeah. Never use minsa.
Fresh is always going to be better, but you can make that's why I used it today. And I think it's a pretty good
Well,
tamal.
it really works, but you need to understand something. Maseca, which is the one that I'm familiar with, it needs to be hydrated. So you need to use more liquid. When you use the nixtamalized corn has been ground and it's fresh, you don't need to add that much liquid. But if you do not hydrate the maseca, you're going to get a brick. So sometimes when I'm doing certain kinds of tamales, I add as much as 4 cups liquid and broth per pound of maseca. And then there's a lard situation, okay? So you need a fat. And I wonder what the Mesoamerican tamales were like. They must have been like bread, very,
I think so.
tough, unless you put a lot of water in them. But you need to have, like, in traditional Latin American cooking, it's like about a pound of lard per pound of maseca.
That's a lot.
Okay, so when I was doing the recipes for my book Gran Cocina Latina, I had a problem with that. And it's not so much about health, but it's like, the kind of lard you get today is not the one that you produce yourself.
Right.
That you render yourself. So it's not great. It's a bunch of problems, hydrogenation, etc. So what to do? So basically what I do is that I reduce, if I need to use lard for authenticity, then I reduce that, but I add more liquid. So it's always like that. And don't be afraid to have a runny dough. In fact, the women in Veracruz that were making that,
The shrimp.
the calabaza and dried shrimp, they would get the masa with a lot of liquid and they put it in the blender, to get it very, very, homogeneous, and it would be perfect. They would not have a problem. The thing is that you're not going to get that masa that is like Play-Doh that you have seen sometimes, that is spread on the husk. It's going to be more watery, but don't be afraid. Do not be afraid. It will work because that masa needs to be hydrated. Same problem with the Venezuelan hallacas. You get the masa harina, also pan, which is the Venezuelan brand, which is very good. But if you do not add enough liquid, you're not going to get your hallacas to be really good. So you need to know there are tricks to the trade.
And you didn't ask me, but one bit of advice I would give when you're working with a new kind of recipe and with ingredients that you're not familiar with, maybe from a culture that you also haven't had the opportunity to see and taste, make it a few times before you make it for company, and then you decide what's right for you. Because Maricel could give you probably 20 different tips, but they might not quite work in your kitchen.
how do you think I got those
Exacto.
tips?
Yeah. This is what we do,
I was
right?
writing a book about something that was unknown to me. I had tasted it here and there,
That's
but I
true,
needed to go to those countries, to those communities, and learn, and then translate that to an American kitchen.
Yep.
So I had many failures. But I can tell you now that I understand. But I tried many, many times.
Okay. One more question.
Do you feel that the water that you use in a different state or a different country makes a difference in the tamal?
Well, listen, I don't use New Jersey water. Let me put it this way. So and you live in New Jersey, so you know.
Wow.
So try to get the best of everything. So if you can, you know a particular, bottled water that you trust, use that one. I mean, if you make tea, are you gonna use the faucet's water? No, a great tea, great oolong from Taiwan, you're not gonna do that. So it's the same thing with tamales.
And I think we have time for just one more question. There was someone here, maybe not. There we go.
Hello. First, I want to say I'm really looking forward to going to your restaurant, Maricel. And I've had plenty of paletas from La Newyorkina. My question, and you kind of alluded to it earlier, just if you could share a little bit more about the role of gender in making tamales and carrying on the tradition of making tamales in family and in communities.
I'm just going to say one thing. Okay, women invented chocolate and they invented tamales.
Huepa.
That's it. No, it's if you look at the who makes tamales in any given community in Latin America, it's the women, and those women in the trucks and coming with the plastic bags, it's a very old tradition. Everywhere in Latin America, you go to a marketplace and the women will be selling all kinds of foods, the moles and the tamales. So it's something that it's ingrained. If you go to Lima, to a market, or certain streets that are famous for the tamaleras, they are there huddled by a big basket of tamales, and they have this ruda. I don't know how to say that in English. Ruda. It's a plant. It's an herb that is supposed to give you good luck. So you see the ruda, or you see these tamales that are like still lives, and they're open, and if they're hot, they have this big rocoto, this big hot pepper, to show you. But this is the women who are doing all this. So gender, female.
Yeah.
And it should not be el tamal, it should be la tamala.
Although in Mexico, I may be wrong, but we it's a more modern thing, but torta de tamal, which is really heavy. So it's have you had torta de tamal?
No, I haven't had that, but it's like with bread.
With
like
bread,
you
so bread and the tamal filling, and I think that was
we
not
have something in Cuba called
women
tamal
done.
preparado.
Oh, you're saying that was a mistake, not done by the women here.
Tamal preparado with the saltine crackers, something so horrendous. Saltine crackers.
Oh, wow.
It's called tamal preparado. It just came to me. Starch upon starch.
Starch upon starch. So I think that was not a women that invented that.
No.
Well, with that, tamalada experts, thank you so much for being here. That's all the time we have.
Thank you.
Appreciate you guys. Oh, yes. I'm gonna let the crew decide how we can let people enjoy this rosca.